Yo, update 6 has just dropped and we have two new familiars that have come alongside update 6, so we will be checking those out in this video. Let's get into the first familiar. So the first familiar that we will be looking at is Ro Jer. This is Bridget's bear, if you did not know. It is a pretty cool looking model, very nice, no animation to it, so it is kind of sad that there isn't any animation, but I guess it is a bear. This bear can be obtained from Act 3 and Act 4 of the Shining Castle Legend stage at a 5% and a 10%. Alright, moving on to Ro Jer's passives, we have our first passive, Warrior's Spirit. Enemies hit by this unit have their HP regeneration reduced by 48% permanently, does not stack. This is able to roll between 5% and 50%. Now his second passive, Killing Machine. This can either be Nature, Unbound, or Spark element and can roll between 2 and 5% damage. Alright, going forward we'll also be showcasing Corruption 3 ranges or potential Corruption 3 ranges. This will be using a minimum roll on the familiar at a 30% increase at the base and then all the way up to 50% as the range. So for this one, we're at 40% reduced regen with a 30% increase. You can get 52% all the way up to 75% with a max roll at 50% increased. Overall, this familiar is pretty good. It is an alternative to bleed units and rupture units, although it will not completely make those units redundant for cutting out regeneration, but it is something that is kind of nice. I don't think it'll be anything too crazy where it would be super meta, but it is just a nice thing to be able to use on units. It is not really a must-have, but I would recommend getting one or two. Now, the next familiar that we will be looking at is Foo. This is from the Fate series. Once again, this is a pretty nice looking model. There are no animations, which is a bit sad, and it is floating, so it is a bit weird too, but it is what it is. This familiar can be obtained from the Rift shop. It requires 100 shards to be able to be purchased. Now moving on to Foo's passives. The first passive we have is Primate Murder. Anytime the equipped unit applies an effect on an ally, buff that ally or ally's damage by 9.9 for the duration of the effect. Now this can roll between 0.1 and 10%. The second passive, Foo can either be Curse, Holy, or Passion elements and can roll between 2 and 5% damage. Now moving on to the Corruption 3 ranges. This is using 8% as a min roll at 30% increase. You can either get 10.4% all the way up to 15% with a max roll at 50% increase. Overall, I think this familiar is very strong. Essentially, it's just making your already existing buffers do even more buffing for damage. Very strong familiar, especially if you can get it up to 15%. Now the current buffers that we have in game are Haruka-Rin, Subaru, Yuhaba, Delusional Boy, Orihime, Hercule, Ishtar, Fubuki, Buikalo, and Buhan. And of the new units, I believe there is Alfalt that buffs Guilty Gear units, and Astolfo, who is a very strong buffer, and I recommend getting him. Let me know if I have missed any other units that this familiar works with, but those are the ones I can think off the top of my head. One other thing to note is that this familiar's buff does not stack with other of the same familiar, so make sure that you are only using one per party. This also works with Yuhaba's second toggle of his ult, so where he takes away damage. This will also still buff units, but it's pretty pointless on Yuhaba. Overall, this familiar is very good and I would highly recommend getting a couple of these. Okay, and this is the end of the familiar showcase. I hope you guys enjoyed. I appreciate it if you have watched this far through the video. See ya.